أجواء إيجابية إن شاء الله.
Good afternoon on this December 14th, almost halfway through December till the end of the new year. I'm Nina Naufal. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television, and these are today's top stories. Agriculture Minister Akram Shayib is vowing that the waste disposal crisis that has been plaguing Lebanon since July will be resolved soon. Turkey withdraws troops from a North Iraqi camp, according to a lawmaker and witnesses on site, after a deployment which Baghdad said went ahead without its permission and sparked a diplomatic row. And a teacher in a Paris suburb is attacked by a man wielding a box cutter and scissors who cited the Islamic State jihadist group. Good afternoon to all our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. We begin today with Prime Minister Tamam Salam. Well, he is warning that the government could become a caretaker in light of the current paralysis, he says, that the cabinet and the country is witnessing. He was quoted as saying, "We may go there in reality, and I have already said that there is no need for a cabinet that does not convene and produce anything." Salam revealed this to the Daily Star in an interview highlighting the 4-month paralysis now of the cabinet. On the stalled presidential settlement that suggested the nomination of Marada leader MP Sulaiman Frangieh for the post of president, Salam said, quote, "Nothing so far indicates that it has stopped. The presidency requires consensus between the various powers until the election becomes possible." A Paris meeting last month between Frangieh and the Future Movement leader Saad Hariri had triggered intense speculation that a presidential settlement was in the making. Replying to a question if the PM believes that Frangieh is a consensual president, Salam said, "When Hariri, who is of the March 14 camp, suggests Frangieh, who is of the March 8 for the post of president, that makes it consensual." In other Lebanese news, Agriculture Minister Akram Shayib is vowing that the waste disposal crisis that has been plunging Lebanon since July will be resolved soon. He announced after holding talks with Prime Minister Tamam Salam, quote, "We discussed the means to fund the export of the trash, and the file will be resolved soon." He made his remarks after meeting with the committee as well that is tasked with following up on the issue. He said, quote, "We will hold the necessary consultations in the next 48 hours and hope to hold a cabinet session on Wednesday afternoon." Shayib said Lebanon has been suffering from a waste disposal crisis since the closure of the Nami landfill in July. Officials have failed to find an alternative solution to the dump site that was tackling Beirut and Mount Lebanon's waste, resulting in the pile-up that you see on the streets throughout the country. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi's son, Hannibal, was questioned at Beirut's Justice Palace as a key witness in the case of Shia Imam Sadr Musa. A judicial source told the Daily Star that Hannibal was interrogated by Judge Zahir Hamedi, who is investigating the disappearance of Amal Movement founder Sadr and his companion, to unveil whether he has any information regarding the case. Media reports said that Sadr's family filed a complaint before the general prosecution against Hannibal. However, General Prosecutor Judge Samir Hammoud delayed its registration. Sources told the Daily Star over the weekend that Sulaiman Hilal Assad, a cousin of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, had emerged as a suspect in last week's kidnapping of Hannibal. Hannibal Gaddafi, who resides in Syria, was kidnapped last week in Damascus before Internal Security Forces Information Branch succeeded in liberating him on Friday. Lebanon holds the slain Libyan leader's regime responsible for Sadr's disappearance, although Libya denies this, claiming that the imam disappeared after traveling to Rome following his visit to Tripoli. However, this claim was refuted by a decision issued last month by Rome's state prosecutor, determining that Sadr never did make it to Rome. In other news, civil defense volunteers are warning that they will escalate measures if a decision to fully employ them was not approved during the parliament session this week. If a decision on our full employment is not approved on Wednesday, we are going to take some surprising measures, the volunteers said in a press conference they held in Martyrs Square. The volunteers have been holding a sit-in in the downtown Beirut since Saturday. The sit-in will continue until their cause is approved. They stressed declaring an open strike until their demands are met. They said, quote, "We have long waited for a solution to our cause. We will not block roads or set tires on fire, but we are going to take our rights." In 2014, a meeting at the Interior Ministry led to consensus over the full employment of civil defense volunteers after several protests were held in different areas across the country. The volunteers demanded that Parliament pass a law on the affairs of the Directorate General of Civil Defense, which would turn them into full-time employees after long years of service, during which many of their colleagues were killed while performing rescue operations. Turkey has withdrawn troops from a North Iraqi camp, according to a lawmaker and witnesses on site, after a deployment which Baghdad said went ahead without its permission and that sparked a diplomatic row. It was not immediately clear how many soldiers were removed from the camp. Where Ankara sent troops and tanks on a deployment last week, it said was routine and necessary to protect Turkish trainers working with Iraqi forces battling the Islamic State jihadist group. Baghdad has sharply criticized the deployment, terming it an incursion that violated the country's sovereignty, repeatedly demanding the forces be withdrawn and complaining to the United Nations Security Council. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu last week sent two of the most powerful men in Turkish foreign policy, Foreign Ministry Under Secretary Feridun Sinirloglu and Intelligence Chief Hakan Fidan, to Baghdad in a bid to settle the tensions. Davutoglu said subsequently an agreement had been reached on a reorganization of the Turkish troops, but it was never made clear what form this would take. The United Nations aid chief condemned attacks on civilians in and near the Syrian capital as unacceptable a day after more than 50 were killed. Such indiscriminate attacks are unacceptable, Stephen O'Brien said in a press conference concluding a 3-day visit to Syria. More than 50 civilians were killed on Sunday in airstrikes and rocket fire on an opposition stronghold east of Damascus and in rebel fire on the capital. O'Brien said this is a tragic reminder of the urgency of finding a political solution and securing a nationwide ceasefire. During his visit, O'Brien met with residents of Wire, a neighborhood in the central city of Homs, where rebels and the regime recently entered a UN-administrated ceasefire. He also met Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Maalem and other senior officials. O'Brien said the UN had been able to deliver life-saving aid to the district for the first time since January. Coming up next, Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop says that compromises were made by all after a landmark agreement on the Global Climate Summit. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the 4:20 o'clock news here on Future Television in English. A teacher in a Paris suburb was attacked by a man wielding a box cutter and scissors who cited the Islamic State jihadist group, according to sources in the police and prosecutor's office. Now, the assault comes after the Islamic State in November urged its followers to kill teachers in the French education system for teaching secularism and being in open war against the Muslim family. The 45-year-old man was stabbed in the side and throat while preparing for his class at a school in Aubervilliers, northeast of Paris, but his life is not in danger. The attacker was dressed in overalls and a balaclava and arrived without a weapon, but grabbed what appeared to be a box cutter that was lying in the classroom, as well as a pair of scissors. According to local prosecutors, the man shouted, "This is Daesh. This is a warning." Daesh is another name for ISIS. The brief exchange was reported by a witness working inside the school. The attacker fled after stabbing the teacher, and the probe has been taken over by anti-terrorist investigators. Still in France, the far right, known as the FN National Front, might have failed to win a single region in elections, but its high score ties the hands of the two main parties with presidential elections 16 months away, according to observers. The anti-immigration party's hopes of winning control of its first ever region were dashed on Sunday as voters turned out in force and switched their support to the center-right Republicans and the socialist of President François Hollande. Despite being relegated to third place, the FN recorded its best ever electoral score with 6.8 million votes. The party's leader, Marine Le Pen, blasted the blocking tactics of the main parties and told supporters, "Nothing can stop us now." The Front National had led in 6 of 13 regions after the first round on December 6, propelled by anger over the moribund economy and fears sparked by last month's jihadist attacks in Paris that left 130 people dead. But Sunday, the center-right alliance of former President Nicolas Sarkozy took 7 regions and the ruling socialists won in 5. So we move to world news, where Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop says that compromises were made by all after a landmark agreement was reached at the Global Climate Summit over the weekend. After 4 years of fraught UN talks, often pitting the interest of rich nations against poor ones, imperiled island states against rising economic powerhouses, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius on Saturday declared the pact adopted to the standing applause and whistles of delegates from almost 200 nations. Now, hailed as the first truly global climate deal, committing both rich and poor nations to reining in rising emissions blamed for warming the planet, it sets out a sweeping long-term goal of eliminating net man-made greenhouse gas output this century.
Well, compromises were made across the board. No one country got everything that they wanted. The agreement is not perfect from every country's point of view. But what was achieved was a compromise that included all countries. And this is the distinction between previous attempts to get a global agreement. The United States, China, India, developed and developing countries all signed on to the one agreement. So of course in that circumstances there are compromises, but Australia got what we were looking for in terms of the mandate that the Cabinet had given me. We've got transparency, we've got accountability, we have 5 yearly reviews, the temperature goal of 2 degrees. We wanted well below 2 degrees, but we recognised that our Pacific Island nations wanted a 1.5 degree aim, and we were able to reference that in the agreement. So I'm very pleased with what Australia was able to achieve, and it was within the mandate that the Australian government had given me to negotiate upon. It's all about using energy more efficiently, embracing renewables, and ensuring that we reduce our reliance on fuels that generate greenhouse gas emissions. But it's also about building efficiency, using electricity more efficiently and the like. We have met and are likely to exceed our 2020 target, and so I'm confident that we'll meet our 2030 target. Australia is one of those nations that says what it's going to do and then does what it says.
Finally, an upbeat story to end this newscast. A magical ballet rendition of the Nutcracker has taken place in the Jordanian capital with the help of 100 budding ballet dancers keen to expose more Jordanians to the beauty of ballet. Dancers from the Freeway Dance Studios captivated the audience with the famous tale, originally choreographed by Marios Petipa and Lev Ivanov, with a score by Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. Ballet choreographer Gina Perminova said that the ballet team wanted to get into the spirit of Christmas when putting on their performance. Now, many of the young performers said they wanted to encourage a greater love and understanding of ballet through the event. Ballet dancer Nawal Haha explained the difficulties of finding a quality ballet school for enthusiastic dancers in Amman. Haha stressed that the organizers have to try very hard to encourage Jordanians to take interest in this particular art form, an alternative interpretation of dance to that of more popular Middle Eastern forms. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Agriculture Minister Akram Shayeb vows that the waste disposal crisis that has been plaguing Lebanon since July will be resolved soon. Turkey withdraws troops from a North Iraq camp, a lawmaker and witnesses on site say, after a deployment which Baghdad says went ahead without its permission and that sparked a diplomatic row. And a teacher in a Paris suburb is attacked by a man wielding a box cutter and scissors who cited ISIS jihadist group and Daesh. Those are your Monday headlines live on Future Television. Make sure to catch us again tomorrow for all the latest. I'm Yumna Nofal signing off. Have a good day.
الأجواء إيجابية إن شاء الله.